for those who don't know Dorie Clark, she's a consultant, keynote speaker, and professor, executive education at Columbia Business School. And she's the Wall Street Journal best-selling author of The Long Game, How to Be a Long-Term Thinker in a Short-Term World, as well as Entrepreneurial You, Reinventing You, Stand Out. And she was recognized as #1 communications coach in the world by the Marshall Goldsmith Leading Global Coaches Awards, and has been described by the New York Times as an expert at reinvention. So this is really sort of something that where you really excel. And I think as an example of that reinvention and that capacity for reinvention, Dorie, it's that now you're, I understand, becoming an up and coming Broadway director and musical theater lyricist. So really, you never cease to surprise. So
Thank you, Nicholas. Yeah, I'm in
thank you very
California
much.
for a reading of one of my musicals, so it should be
Cool.
fun.
Cool. Great,
Well,
great.
thank you so much. Should I go ahead and take it away?
Please, yes.
All right. Well, hi everyone. It's so nice to have the chance to talk with you today. And I mean, let's get right at it, right? It's, how do you play the long game as communications professionals? I mean, I imagine, because this is, I am one of you. This is a hat that I wear as well. I came up and got my start in the work that I do as a press secretary on political campaigns and as a journalist. So as a nonprofit executive director. So communications was always a crucial part of what I did. And I think, there's a couple of things that we're all dealing with. One is the thing that we have always been dealing with, but it kind of continually feels like more and more and more, which is we want to be strategic thinkers. I think in general, we can safely say, yes, we are bought in. That is a good thing to be. In fact, there was a study that I quoted in my book, The Long Game, that there was a survey of 10,000 senior leaders by an organization called the Management Research Group, and 97% of them agreed. Like, what do they agree on? That's 97%, but 97% agreed that the #1 most important thing that they could be doing is long-term strategic thinking. So everyone thinks it's a good idea. The problem, of course, is in the execution, because we get pulled in a million directions, and there are so many just exigent circumstances and things that, some of them are profound and some of them are ridiculous, like, oh, I've got to answer this Slack message or whatever, that pulls us away from the things that we want to be doing, that we know that we ought to be. So that is kind of a perennial concern with, with us, with anyone in business. But it's a challenge. It's a real challenge. The part that is new is that we can't blame people. What do they know? They it seems like they knew just about as much as we did. But over the past 40 years or something, we've been sold a little bit of a bill of goods, because what we have been told time and again is, where technology's going. Technology is going to replace all of the boring, rote, robotic things. Watch out, actuaries. Watch out, radiologists, that all you do is pattern recognition. Watch out, bookkeepers. All of the boring stuff is going to get eliminated. But what's going to be even more valuable is creative, human-based tasks. That's what's going to save us, is our humanity. Well, guess what? Robots still can't really drive cars all that well. Robots still can't even sell us things in restaurants. All the robot restaurants seem to be closing. And yet the thing that is being disrupted the most quickly is the kind of liberal arts, college educated work that we do. So this is extremely unfortunate information, because the robots are taking the fun jobs. So how do we deal with that? And we have to really, sort of imagine, right? I mean, the things that are getting displaced incredibly fast. I mean, it's writing social media copy, writing press releases, even coming up with communication strategies at a high level. And so I think the real question that we're grappling with is, in a world where our skills have been almost instantly and brutally commoditized, how can we convince people that we are worth it? How do we actually make sure that we're worth it?
Mhm.
Because I know for a lot of things, if I could pay 20 bucks a month for something rather than paying $5,000 a month for a human to be on retainer, I'd like to do that too. And
Mm.
so it's not like we can necessarily fight the tides. They're so huge. We have to outsmart it. We have to go around the side. So I want to just kick things off by sharing a few ideas and also get your thoughts and your perspective on the ground about this, because this is a real thing that is not about planning for 5 years from now. It's kind of about planning
Mm.
for today. So the first thing that I want to mention is the importance of networking. Now that sounds kind of basic, right? Like why is that so important? Okay, we know this. Networking is always good. It helps you get jobs. What I want to suggest is that in a world where things are commoditized and a lot of skills can be outsourced really rapidly, if we think back to Robert Cialdini and his work on influence and persuasion, there was these sort of six classic levers, right? One of them about how to get people to do things. One of the levers is just simple. It's liking. And I want to propose to you, this might sound a little bit ridiculous because this is not a skills-based argument whatsoever, but if people like you, you are more likely to hold on to your job. And so this is the worst time to retrench. We need to get really smart. I mean, a lot of people in communications, like myself, maybe introverts, may not be so into networking. But the truth is, if someone doesn't know really who you are, if you're working inside of an organization and they see that your job can be done really rapidly by an electronic thing,
Mm.
like you're gone. There's no reason. Whereas if you are entrenched in that organization, if people know you, if they like you, if they think positively about you, and if you have a certain je ne sais quoi that you are bringing to the organization in terms of ideas, connections, et cetera, you are more valuable than the sum of your parts. And this becomes really important. And so, as research that I always like comes from Ronald Burt at the University of Chicago. He's a sociologist, and he talks about how to make yourself indispensable in an organization. And the key of his research, he basically talks about how in almost any large organization, silos form. We know this intuitively,
Mhm.
right? There's all kinds of silos that people are not talking to each other. And it turns out that what makes people really valuable in an organization, as measured by their peers, as measured by performance reviews, is to be the person that bridges those gaps, that connects those silos. Because if these people and these people are not talking, there's a lot that's getting lost. There's information and best practices that should be shared, and they're not. And so there's inefficiencies. And if you can be the person that knows a lot of things and knows a lot of people and connects them, then it makes you really valuable. And you are seen, you not only are valuable, you are seen to be valuable by other people. And the good news is communications is in the perfect position for that, because you need to keep your fingers on the pulse of what's going on so that you can report about it. So I would say thinking, about, how do we survive AI? Really being robust and thoughtful in your networking strategy inside your organizations and outside is going to be really crucial. Another theme that I like to think about and talk about, and this is one of the things that I bring up in my book, The Long Game, as well, is um, what I will call 20% bets. Now,
Mm.
you all have probably heard of Google and their 20% time. Um, Even people at Google are very busy now, so most Googlers do not take advantage of this, even though in theory this is encouraged. The idea is that you would spend up to 20% of your time pursuing kind of more experimental activities, things that are not directly related to your core job, but might have a learning benefit or potentially, who knows, a financial benefit, learning benefit for you, financial benefit for the organization down the road. Might not work, and you're not penalized if it doesn't work, but it could. And this is how Gmail was developed. This is how Google News was developed. It's hard, it's hard because everyone's busy and you have to really be thoughtful about carving that time out. It's a lot easier not to. And 20% might be too much. Maybe that's not feasible in your life now. Maybe it's 5%, maybe it's 10%. But what I want to encourage you to do is that regardless of what your organization is doing, if you're employed by an organization, you should be doing this for yourself, because you need to be making long-term developmental bets on yourself. Maybe that, 20%, 10%, whatever it is devoted to learning about AI, and just playing with the different models. How is Notebook LM different than Claude? How is it different than GPT? Et cetera, et cetera. Maybe it's about something totally different. Maybe you realize, you know what, I could be more valuable if I took my communication skills and I created a Venn diagram where there's overlap with whatever, with sales. Maybe there's overlap that I could do with supply chain, with HR, whatever it is. But it makes you more bulletproof if you're cultivating additional skills. No one is going to do this for you. No one is going to say, you know what you really ought to do is carve out this time for this developmental opportunity. You have to be absolutely rigorous and fight to protect it. But if you do, it can be really powerful. That's like the learning edge. And it could even be small things. It could be about, on your commute to work, or your time at the gym, maybe instead of listening to Spotify music, maybe you start listening to podcasts for professional development things. But those little edges can make a big difference in terms of what you're doing. So thinking about what is my 20% and how am I going to cultivate it? So we've got aggressive networking. We've got skills development in the 20% time. Another strategy that I want to chat about briefly, and of course, as Nicholas mentioned, we want to have lots of time for your thoughts, your comments, your experiences, and Q&A. So I'll make this my last one here. But a concept that I really like to think about is the question of, risk mitigation, essentially. I am the world's biggest fan of how do you do something and make sure that whatever the downside is, the downside is capped. We can all afford to lose a little bit if we're strategic, but most of us can't afford to lose a lot. So how can we have bets that are in our favor at all times? And so I'll give you an example. This is something that I also write about in the long game. There's a colleague of mine, a friend named Jonathan Brill, and he told me a story that I thought was really interesting. He's like a futurist. He does a lot of interesting speaking and consulting on it. But he decided a few years back that a thing that he was fascinated by was like the food and beverage industry. He wanted to learn more about that. He thought that was a thing that was worth exploring. And he said to himself, like, how can I do that? What's a vehicle that I can do? And so he learned that the World's Fair was taking place. I think that year it was in Italy. Now, we don't really necessarily hear that much about the World's Fair anymore. I think everybody's heard about, the Columbian Exhibition of 1893 or whatever. Like then it was like a really big deal, the World's Fair. But nowadays it's still a big deal in its own world, but it doesn't really penetrate the same way. But it's an interesting opportunity. And he learned that it was going on and that food was the theme of it. And it also turned out that there was kind of a lot of red tape around it. It was going to be really expensive for organizations to be involved. So a lot of the big players were not involved for whatever reason. But he knew some people and he's like, you know what? If I actually got involved in this, if I volunteered my time, I could probably meet a lot of people. I could, because there's this kind of gap, there's this power vacuum, I could probably have a disproportionate impact. So he raised his hand and he said, you know what, if this goes nowhere, what have I wasted? Like I've wasted time. That's too bad, but I will still have learned a lot about the food world. I will still have met a lot of people. Even if it doesn't ever turn into money for me, it is my own curriculum that I am pursuing. So I can learn information and I can make friends and build a network, both of which were pretty valuable to him. So he said, okay, that's a reasonable risk. So he got pretty heavily involved and he worked on it for months and months. He did meet people, he did learn things. He also, as it turns out, ended up getting millions of dollars of contracts as a result of the networking he did from it. So it really paid off. But at a minimum, he had capped his downside. And so the thing I want to suggest to all of us is as we think about these learning edges and the projects that we're choosing for ourselves, how do we win even if we lose? This is a situation where the world has changed really rapidly for us in the last couple of years in terms of, I'm not even sure that the people around us understand how much it's changed. This may be a roadrunner situation where you are running, where we are all running, and it's fine until we realize that the ground has moved. And so we need to be as prepared as we possibly can, because once the full implications of what's going on in AI are manifest, things are going to shake out really rapidly. And so if we can position ourselves as the person that everybody knows and likes, the person who is valuable inside of our organizations as a connector, as an innovator, as a person who, makes shidducks and connects everybody. This is going to be really valuable. And a person who is um, continuing to grow and develop your skills in adjacent areas so that you can be a little bit of a Swiss Army knife. I think that is my best thinking about how we can protect ourselves and be even more robust and resilient moving forward, despite the technological developments that have come and will continue to come. But you guys are on the front lines, and I would really love to hear your questions and especially your comments, your observations, and your perspective about how we can arm ourselves. So, with that, if it sounds okay to you, Nicholas, I will kick it back to you for further discussion.
Sure, sure. If you want, what we can do is we can kind of use the Mentimeter survey as kind of a discussion piece, because what it will do is then give us kind of an idea of what people are thinking, and get an idea of the trend so that we can continue talking about it. And then also, if anyone wants to put a question in the chat, they're also more than welcome. So what I'll do is I'll share my screen, just 1 second. I'll have that up. And 1 second here. Great. Let's see. Okay, gotcha. Okay, if everyone can see my screen, there's a QR code that you can, and I'll put in, actually in the chat, I'll put in also a link that you can join if you aren't able to then click on the QR code. Just 1 second, I'll put that in the chat. And also, if you prefer, you can also just go to menti.com and add a code. So I'll put that in the chat as well, if the link doesn't work for you. So can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Great, great, great. So I'll let me present. Okay. So first, I think the first question is, how do you feel about your career and where it's going? Is it on the right track? Do you have a short-term plan? Do you have a long-term vision? Or maybe you're not sure where it's going. So the idea here is to see if you can uh, start to put in, I guess, where you are, and then hopefully that can kind of create a discussion around some of those. So we got a short-term planner here, so that's great. And I think this is a thing. So Dorie, I think, setting that long-term vision. What are your tips for setting that long-term vision, knowing that things could change really quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to setting a long-term vision, one of the strategies that I'm always a fan of is number one, asking yourself the question, who am I jealous of? I always like that because, we think of jealousy as kind of this bad thing that we need to tamp down, but I actually think it can be useful as sort of almost like a primal thing. It's like, oh, what is the thing where it's like, I want that?
Mm,
Because if we actually take a step back and analyze, well, why do we want that? What is it that's so appealing? It can help give us a sense of what we're after. And it might not be obvious. Like, there might be pieces from different people, but that's kind of a good way to work backwards, to essentially have some breadcrumbs for us. Another thing that I hear oftentimes, having written a book about long-term strategy, is that sometimes people feel a little bashful about the idea of setting really long-term goals or, big goals, audacious goals, because they feel like, well, that's not an appropriate goal because I don't really know how to do it or how to get there.
mhm.
And something that I would really like to encourage people about is the great news about long-term goals is, of course, you don't know how to get there. That's fine. Like it would almost be hubristic to assume that if you set a 20-year goal that you would know precisely how to get there. Like, it's almost ridiculous the number of variables between here and 20 years from now. We've had just in the last few years, we've had global pandemics, we've had
Mm,
economic disruptions, in different countries. You've had political upheavals. There's so much we can't predict. And so even beginning to worry about, sort of a longer term vision is it's just not necessary. What we really need to do is just have two things, which is, okay, what is the outcome we're hoping for? And then what is the next step? I liken it to driving in the fog. You can get there, you
mhm,
going, a meter at a time, and that's fine. You actually can get there, and it's sometimes much easier than you planning out an entire route and then starting on it and then discovering like, oh, well, traffic's been rerouted and you're screwed because you don't know how to adapt in the moment. So I think that the long-term thinking, as long as we actually are just willing to engage in the question of like, well, actually, what is my North Star? What would I like my life to look like?
yeah.
I think we can often get there better than we might think.
And keeping to those values, that mission statement as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I'm curious,
Great.
what do you think of these numbers, Nicholas? Is this what you would expect?
I think so. I think we have a propensity here for the short-term plan, but we do have about quite a bit of people who are a little bit worried about the future. So how do you sort of try to mitigate some of the issues? So you talked about networking, and I know that what you were those studies that show that networking can then lead to serendipitous opportunities, and that's what actually creates luck and new opportunities. But what are some other ways that you think people can sort of take on these big challenges with a little bit more optimism?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it certainly can feel hard or overwhelming at times if, things are
Hmm.
moving and things are changing and we're trying to figure out what our place is. I feel like in some ways I got an early taste of this for better and for worse
Hmm.
because I began my career, my very first job out of graduate school was being a journalist. And I joined the paper that I joined in the year 2000. And like a fun historical fact that I feel like is so telling is that the year 2000 was literally the most lucrative year on record in history for the print journalism industry. It was the all-time high watermark. There was literally never a better, richer, frothier time to join a
Hmm.
newspaper. And yet, I was laid off within a year, and within a handful of more years, it became really clear that the industry was just hemorrhaging. And
Hmm.
so, like who could have kind of predicted that, and especially that it had changed. So it was it was alarming, of course. But the interesting thing for me is that it made me realize really early on how incredibly transferable those skills are. The job that I have today, where, I consult and speak and do some executive coaching and things like that, it leverages everything that I learned from being a journalist. And
Hmm.
I think sometimes we even get locked in to the viewpoint that other people have, where it's like, well, you trained for this, this is what you're good for. And the answer is we're good for a lot more. The skills that we have in the communications world, being able to articulate your ideas well, being able to write well, being able to speak well, being able to understand what is newsworthy, what constitutes a story, what's a good angle, what's good positioning. Those are things that are always useful. And it's our chance to be able to say, you know what, yeah, things could turn upside down. And I hope that if you have a job that you really love, that you get to keep it as long as you want. But it's also very empowering to know that in your back pocket, you have abilities that you can transform at a moment's notice, to other things.
Mhm.
And, my first book that I ever wrote was called Reinventing You. And the truth is, other people don't exert a lot of mental energy thinking about, gosh, how are her skills transferable? I wonder what else she could do. I wonder where we could fit her in. Like, they don't. They're pretty self-absorbed. They're
Mm,
pretty busy.
mm,
But we should not let that fact, we should not let their intellectual indolence impact our view of ourselves. Because the truth is, just because other people can't see it or envision it immediately at first glance doesn't mean it's not possible. You have an almost infinite ability to reinvent yourself with the broad-based skills that you have. And this is actually kind of an exciting time that in your
mhm,
back pocket, if you wish, you can begin to think about, all right, what is really genuinely exciting for me? And if I choose to, or if it becomes necessary for me to, how could I execute the plan B?
mm,
And to have thought about that and to be ready to execute when the time is right, um, puts you just leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else. But I would love, Nicholas, if it's cool with you, I'd
mhm.
love to hear from folks. Like maybe folks could like do the little hand raise button with the React
Sure,
thing down at
sure.
the bottom. What are you doing in terms of keeping yourself ready and fresh and your professional development? How are you hedging against disruption? And what are you doing to stay ahead of the curve? I'm sure we can all learn from each other, and I would love to hear from folks if that's cool. So please, again, down
Sure.
at the bottom, use the React button to raise your hand. And I see Luann. Is it cool, Nicholas, to take
Yeah, of
down the
course, of course.
Mentimeter so we can see Luann better?
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right. Hey, Luann, tell us more.
Oh, are you able to unmute? There we go.
Excellent.
Okay. I thought I would jump in. For me, I'm using the word collaboration. So I work by myself as a consultant, but I'm getting more and more opportunities to collaborate with others around conversations and topics, and I'm finding that that's really valuable to learn alongside others and keep my skills up to date. So I'm doing that through research and through writing, events as well. So taking my business of one and collaborating with others to learn alongside each other. And some of that, we talked about this, Dorie, is actually collaborating with academics as well. So bridging the practitioner academic gap. So learning in lots of different ways.
I love that. Thanks, Luann. That's such a great point, and it's true. I mean, ultimately, when you're sort of weaving these ties, it's both a form of networking and it's a form of making it easier for your work to spread because you have the power of other people's ideas and networks as well. So that's really cool. Eduvi, is that the right way to say it?
Hi, Dorie. Can you hear me
Hi.
okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
Thanks.
brilliant. It's Eduvie. Nice to meet you.
Eduvi, thank you. Hey, we'd love to hear from you.
Uh, Yes, I think I have a comment and then I have a question. From my side, I went into this moment post-pandemic when I started to reflect on how work should be much more than showing up to your 9 to 5. You should also be doing a bit more. So volunteering has been the one thing that I have extended myself to doing and has helped me build my network. I've met so many fantastic people along the way. But you said something that I found quite fascinating around transferable skills. And I wanted to build on that to just ask you the question around how do you then show? 'Cause there is a tendency to be known for one thing and then to be sort of boxed into that one thing. And in the long game, really, we need different types of skills, which we have, but maybe we've just been playing one particular skill much more than others. How do you see, from your experience, people able to showcase these transferable skills so that they can be seen as much more, like, for instance, people transitioning from internal to external or taking on a bigger role, or like a corporate comms role? So it would be lovely to hear your thoughts around that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, so as I mentioned, my very first book that I wrote was called Reinventing You. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I'll actually just mention in the chat, if you guys are interested, um, there's a free Reinventing You self-assessment that anyone can download at dorieclark.com/reinvent. So that for people who are into that topic, that might be useful. But broadly speaking, I would say that in terms of demonstrating the expertise, there's a lot of ways we can do it. Social media is actually fantastic for this. I mean, we all know we all know the ways that social media is not fantastic. But one way that it really is fantastic is that if you are trying to change other people's perceptions of you, you need repeat reinforcement, right? Like it's you can't just tell somebody once, oh, hey, I'm doing blah, blah, blah. Like they will forget. They will forget in an instant. I used to work in politics, and they would always say in politics that a person would need to hear the candidate's name 7 times before they'll literally even remember the candidate's name. So we need a lot of reinforcement. And so social media is the opportunity for you to just like keep posting about things like, hey, I read this great article in Fast Company and it's about this thing I'm very passionate about. Or, oh, hey, here's a picture of me volunteering on the committee doing the thing that I want you to remember, or, whatever it is. But that can sort of help with the ambient awareness. Another thing that I really like, which is super basic, I feel like this is the ultimate low-hanging fruit of reinvention, is it is inevitable. It's literally inevitable that if you are seeing somebody that you haven't seen for a while, they're going to ask you some variation of the question, what have you been up to recently? What are you doing? How have you been spending your time? And most of us, I think we know that question is coming, and yet we don't plan for it. And so if we always have a good answer in our back pocket for what have we been doing, it can essentially advance your reinvention goals, because you can say, oh, it's so interesting. I just went to a conference talking about this, or I just wrote an article talking about that, or I just volunteered to serve on this volunteer capacity doing this other thing. And you can keep hitting that note so that people realize, like, oh, right, she's doing this now. And that's kind of a very easy way to, because, hey, they're asking to get the message across. So thank you. That's a great question. And Aned, I'd love to hear from you.
Hello, and well, I can say I can share and relate to what Luan has said and to what you've just said recently, how to keep up with all this chaotic sometimes world is having actually a network that kind of supports you. And I'm part of this WhatsApp group, and we are called High Performing People. So we share our ideas over there. Sometimes we think like we are a little bit crazy, but we just share every thought over there, and we try to also help the rest of the group who belongs there. So that's one thing. The other thing is I'm a teacher, a professor at a university, a business school university here in Mexico. So also I try to keep up training and trying to enroll into different courses, like hearing these kind of conversations with you, Dorie. That's also part of what keeps me updated. And most importantly, I just try to also share everything that I'm learning with my students, and also practice it in my personal brand, like not just keeping it. There's a person that I follow that she says, knowledge without action is always ends up in frustration. So I try to I try to I try to do that. I'm not so good at it, but I just do my best, and I just feel like we this is a moment where we just need to keep on moving, keep on learning. It will never end. So it's like just go with the flow and recognize what you're good at, what you can be better at, and surround yourself with people that can always push you to be the better person of yourself.
That's so great. And thank you for sharing that. I love it. Thank you. And Ruxandra, we'd love to hear from you.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Dory, I have to say I'm a huge fan. I loved your book. It was by far one of the absolute favorite reads for me this year. Um, I fully resonate with what you said about transferable skills. So I'm a former academic, and as a researcher, I realized that something that AI still can't do very well is research, at least in-depth research based on real data. So I try to use that to my advantage in my role as a communicator now. For instance, I use analytic tools to assess the impact of campaigns and to report on it. So I apply these skills to interpret engagement metrics or to identify any relevant trends for my organization and to recommend adjustments. So I think we can all spot that thing that we're better compared to AI and leverage that to our advantage. And I also had a question for you because you mentioned the importance of networking. Would you have any advice for those of us who might see networking as being transactional or might be introverts on how to make networking with other comms professionals more natural, more comfortable?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that, Roxandra. And I love your thinking about the research. I think that's so spot on. I mean, certainly original primary research for sure as well is an additional thing that so far AI can't really do very well. So, we can lean into that for sure. When it comes to networking, I think honestly, what makes it feel transactional or not is the lens that we're bringing to it, right? Like if we're sort of like, oh God, I have to do this thing and I have to meet the people, blah, blah, blah. Like what I really try to do personally is just go into it where it's like, I want to make friends. I want to meet interesting people. And like so one of the things that I share, as you probably saw in the long game, is I have this rule that I put forward, which is no asks for a year from networking contacts. And the reason that I suggest such a thing is that a really important thing is just even for ourselves to completely remove the idea of like, what can I get out of something? Because if we go into it, it's like, oh, if I, do this thing, like if I go to this event and then I talk to her, maybe I can get on her podcast. Then the whole thing becomes this like nefarious thing about like, how can I drop hints so that she'll invite me on her podcast or like whatever the thing is we want. And that does feel gross because it is gross. So like set it aside. The most important thing that we can do for networking is to be utterly zen and to need nothing. If we literally are like, I'm good, I am complete as a human being, I need nothing other than just having an interesting conversation with an interesting person and we're going to be friends, then I mean, like, there's nothing bad about that. And they're going to sense that you have good intentions and it creates a sort of reciprocal thing. I think the other thing that is crucial for me personally as an introvert is I don't like the way that most networking events that are created by other people are structured because no offense to extroverts, but I think that when extroverts structure networking activities, they structure them for themselves, right? They structure the things that they like, that feel good to them. And honestly, it's a little bit lazy to me, I feel like, because it's basically like, we'll put people in a room and then things will happen. And it's like, okay, maybe that's true for you, but that doesn't happen for me. That sounds terrifying and awful. So I like things that are smaller. I like things that are more curated. And I like things where I actually know who's going to be there so that I can like kind of plan and think about it and like, what do I want to talk to this person about? So most people don't create events like that. So I create events like that. I create the events that I want and they're nicer for me. And I think honestly, they're nicer for other people. So anyway, those are my thoughts here, but thank you so much. And I want to make sure, I guess we're running short on time, but Kanajawa, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. We'd love to hear from you.
Hi, sorry. So my name is Panajua, by the way.
Najwa, thank you. Hey.
No worries. I just wanted to say I really, when you talk about the concept of like reinventing yourself, so while I've worked in like many capacities that contributed to my, as we talk about like, transferable skills, I believe that a lot of the experience I've had in the past is what contributed to my role as now a communication specialist. But still having to like juggle all of those various things as a communication specialist. Sometimes I feel like I do more than just communicate. Um, But I found myself now, especially being as young as I am, this is really kind of like the beginning of my career for me. This is why I joined the organization to get more immersed around other communicators. Um, but you are true, like that space of like the thing that came to mind for me was like reinventing mindset. So even like for me now, we talked about like networking. Um, I work for a regional planning council. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of what that is, but so now I am leading a communications working group for all of the regional planning councils in my region in Florida. Like a big task to like take on for me, but you are true. Like I came in with the mindset of like, I just want to like build a relationship. I want to be able to have others to like bounce ideas off of, things that aren't working for us are working for us. So I'm really excited to like get your book and dive into it. But I think that is, especially as people that use our mind the most, like that mindset aspect of real. They say one thank you, but that's what came to my mind.
Kanachua, thank you very much for sharing. I appreciate that, and I love it that you are, creating your world domination path in the regional planning agencies, and I think that's really cool. And it's great that you sort of have centered in around the reinvention conversation, because one of the concepts that I talk about in Reinventing You is the idea of what I call lowercase r reinvention versus uppercase r reinvention. The lowercase, the uppercase reinvention is sort of what we all think about, which is like, oh my God, I changed jobs, I changed careers, it's this big disruption. And that happens sometimes. That happens to all of us, a few times in our careers. But what we, I think, need to do, I would argue, is that we need to be in kind of a perpetual state to get comfortable with the lowercase r reinvention, which is what are these small ways that we can keep ourselves fresh and keep ourselves just continually learning, so that when the larger disruptions do happen, because sometimes, hey, things get thrown at us, they are less traumatic because we have essentially been cross-training for them on an ongoing basis. So thank you so much for that. For people who want to kind of continue to learn more about this, I'll also mention too, in addition to the Reinventing You self-assessment, there's another one, which, yeah, Nicholas just typed in there. It's the long game strategic thinking self-assessment. So you can kind of dive through. It's like a series of questions that you can kind of ask yourself that hopefully would be insightful as you ponder questions about how to tap more into being a long-term thinker that we all want to be. But Nicholas, let me hand things back to you.
No, I think that's great. I wanted to add that link, but I think that one of the issues, as you've said before, is to really have that incremental change, incremental step towards your long-term vision, and also to get used to as well. I think we all, as communications experts, needs to get used to getting outside of our comfort zone, because things are changing and we have to continuously be moving. As far as maybe that ends that last note, what would be sort of your key to getting outside of your comfort zone and getting used to being outside of your comfort zone? Seth Godin recently, he said, if you're not uncomfortable, you're not, succeeding. So what would be kind of like some advice that you would have on that? Because I think that's one of the keys, right? I think of succeeding in that long-term vision is getting outside regularly of your comfort zone.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm also going to yes and it a little bit, in the sense that sometimes when people hear that, they envision sort of the most dramatic use case, which is like,
Mhm.
I need to go skydiving so that then I can really get comfortable, with being outside my comfort zone. And I don't think we need to do skydiving, or sort of whatever the metaphorical equivalent of that is. I'm not a fan of being uncomfortable for the sake of being uncomfortable. But I do think that it's a question of just what is necessary to get us where we want to go. Like, we don't
Mhm.
need to make ourselves miserable in life. It's not like, oh yeah, I need to learn to like sleep on the floor when it's 30 degrees outside or something. It's like, don't torture ourselves. But it's also true that sometimes things that are important for us make us uncomfortable. Like,
Mhm.
I'm assuming that this is probably less common among professional communicators, but like the example would be like somebody who's afraid of public speaking. It's like, okay, I understand that that would make some people uncomfortable. Also, it's kind of important for career advancement. So if you actually want to get to the place, that is a necessary thing. And so I'm always a fan of just working backwards and asking the question like, okay, legitimately, based on the goals that I have, what do I need to be prepared to do? What skills do I need to have in my back pocket? How can I make sure that if I am lucky enough that the opportunity presents itself, that I will be ready to take it on and to handle it with aplomb rather than dropping the opportunity when I have it. And so if we can get good at that and to recognize like, okay, I might hate doing this thing, whatever this thing is, but if there's a legitimate reason and goal for it, then fine, I will suck it up and do it. Not because it's so important to like always torture myself, but because this thing is necessary for my goals and my goals matter to me.
Yeah. Step by step.
Yes.
Super. Well, listen, thank you so much, Dorie, for everything. So please, everyone, there's the link there for the resource, which is a great resource to sort of question yourself. Am I adopting long game approach, and what are the ways that I can do that? So thank you so much for everything, and we look forward to staying in touch as well. Thank you, Dorie.
Thank you, Nicholas.
All
Thank
right.
you, everyone.
Best of luck on Broadway. And yeah, all right.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Okay, bye everyone.